the participant list, and everyone looks nice. So.
And they're all in their underwear.
Yes.
Nice.
Okay. I believe
Yeah, I'm gonna go get comfortable.
We're live. So I just wanted to welcome this panel, which was put together by Jim and the team at Fresh Address, but incredible names, Janet Roberts, Luke Glasner, and Jennifer. I'm so glad to have you guys here.
They're all in their underwear.
Really appreciate everything that you did at the last minute. And I'm really looking forward to this panel. If you guys have got Hop-In open at the same time as this, you might want to mute your other tabs because there'll be feedback. Jim and the team at Fresh Address, but incredible names.
Okay. All right, we are ready to go. Jen, I think your microphone is off. And there you are. So welcome, everyone. We are planning a great event for you right now. We have Growing Your List Safely. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're thrilled to be here. We have a great panel of experts who are bringing a wide range of viewpoints on the whole issue of list acquisition and how it relates to deliverability. And one of our goals today is to show how acquisition and list hygiene affect deliverability. You might even understand that, but not everyone on your team or in your company does. So I hope we either help you learn a little bit more about the relationship or give you the tools and the language that you can take back to your team and to people in your company to explain why it matters and what the cost of poor acquisition and list hygiene habits really is. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with introductions. And let's see, Jim, let's start with you.
Thanks, Janet. Jim Tinney, Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Fresh Address. I started with Fresh Address on March 20th daily, by the way. So I literally started on the 23rd, and Massachusetts shut down offices on March 24th, and we haven't been back since. So, but we won't talk about that impact that COVID-19 is. We'll get into email.
All right, and Luke, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Luke Glasner, and I've been working in email since 2005. I've run Glasner Consulting, where I do independent email marketing consulting since 2009. And I'm looking forward to speaking with everyone today and covering any questions or whatever we want to talk about for deliverability. In 15 years, I've done everything from coding to sync my own messages. So I've been there.
Thanks, Luke. And Luke and I have met at several conferences. We go back a lot of years, and Luke is one smart guy. Next, Jen, let's hear from you, please.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Nespola Lantz, and I work at Zeta Global. I have been in email since 2005 as well. And I've also been through many different roles from coding to product training and into the deliverability world, which I've been doing for about 7 years now. So I'm looking forward to this call and everything that, all the questions that you may have and the topics we'll discuss.
Great, thanks. And Zach, tell us about yourself.
Yep, my name is Zach Lavenberg. I'm the Vice President of Client Strategy at DMI Partners. I've been there since 2011, and we're a digital marketing agency, offer a lot of channel management solutions, and so we have a lot of clients that we do email work for, and acquisition is, the number one priority for all of them going into every year. So we've really challenged ourselves to become experts in acquisition solutions that allow you to grow your database with engagement, not just list size.
Great, thanks. Okay, let's dive into it. We have quite a few questions for people. And just a couple of housekeeping things, as most of you who are used to virtual conferences know. If you have any questions or comments, if you look on your screen, I'm looking on a laptop, so for me it's to the right. To the right, yes. You can drop your comments and questions there, and we'll take them up during the session. I don't know that we have the ability to open up for comments, but if you've got questions or comments, drop them in the comments and I'll bring them to the attention of the panel. So let's start with something that's really at the top of a lot of people's agendas right now, and that is COVID, which is still with us and which has been having kind of an unexpected effect. We've seen it on all aspects of email and digital marketing, but specifically for our panel, I want to ask you, what impact have you seen from the COVID-19 pandemic, generally in email marketing, or specifically in a marketer's ability to reach the inbox and acquire new customers? And Jim, I'd like to toss this question to you first, if you want to tackle it and tell us what you're seeing at Fresh Address.
Sure, and thank you. So what impact have we seen from COVID-19? Number one, the reliance on email to communicate with customers and donors in a new way. It absolutely became paramount to one's success to use email. And we all know that email has been or has had the highest rate of return on marketing efforts over the last number of years. But its importance accelerated greatly once COVID hit, right? So, and Keith went through he saw 3 different stages of COVID. There was the closing, the shutdowns, the reopenings, and the new normal. Whoever thought we'd ever still be here? What are we, 9 months in? I, for one, didn't. But what we've seen is marketers are acting differently. There's more reliance on email. There's a huge pressure to increase the size of your email list, which has caused some poor practices, reaching further back into their email list, going and reaching to unengaged users, making mistakes along the way, growing their list too fast, leading to problems, with being flagged or blocked. And there's some simple solutions that emailers can take. Cleanse your list before you ever email to it. If you're going into an old unengaged list, make sure you remove all the junk from that email before you ever send it out, so that you're not putting yourself at risk. But I think the other thing to really think about around this question is behaviors have changed, and I don't think they're going to revert back. So COVID's gone on much longer than we all thought it was going to go on, and it's going to continue into 2021. Unfortunately, don't shoot the messenger. So people are getting more and more used to how to act, and the reliance on email is not going to go away.
Okay, great, thank you. Who else wants to tackle this?
I also have something to say. I agree with Jim with what he just summarized. And I think in addition to what marketers are doing, we've got our customers also reacting to that. And I think some of the changes that we're seeing is a lot of mail in our mailboxes that we have to manage. So outside of data management on the marketing side, we have to consider the fact that your consumers also are inundated with messages. So you have to be smart about your message, your cadence. I've noticed that marketers are also sending, not just expanding, but they're sending more often. So now you're dealing with even more mail from just the same sender, and now you add everybody else in. So that's also something that we have to be aware of, because that will also change your customers' reaction, which essentially will change your deliverability if those reactions aren't in a positive light.
Okay. Zach, what are you seeing?
So we kind of saw a lot of the same, and I think across the board, all of our clients in March and April just had these panic moments where it exposed all the things that they had meant to do for email, but had never gotten around to, that now was more important than ever. Like everyone was aware that the engaged portion of their email list that was actually replying to their emails regularly wasn't representative of their full customer reach. We work with a lot of consumer brands and retail stores that they know they have millions and millions of customers out there, but only a small portion of that are they actually getting to engage on a regular basis. So when the world shut down, and email was the easiest way to get updates out, like why our products aren't on the shelves, that we do delivery now instead of dine in, or we got all these great e-commerce. They couldn't communicate to all of the customers they wanted to, because they hadn't spent years acquiring those people, opting in for email, or re-engaging old ones. So it kind of made more of a priority than ever, making sure as much of your customer base is opted into your email program and as engaged as possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Luke, how about you?
I'm the only one left, so I'll go next. I've seen very similar things to what everyone else described. One thing I noticed just as a recipient of email was that, in a way, I can see senders are starting to panic, right? The pressure came down hard on every one of you that sits in that send button seat and has to push that button every day. And now, with our typical holiday bump of volume, that's another thing I've seen. It's like Jennifer mentioned, it's not only the, going to more people and digging deeper in my list and maybe running into some questionable addresses, but it's also that we're sending more times a day, more frequently. And in a way, I haven't studied this during COVID, but prior to this, I studied this last year. And I find that people that get into multiple messages a day are really just kind of cannibalizing themselves and driving up their own costs for labor, CPMs, production, everything that goes into it. So despite the fact that the sky is falling from above us, we should take a moment to stop and think about our subscribers, because doing right by them is the best thing we can do for our deliverability.
Is anybody seeing any market changes in people's willingness to opt into email right now? We have talked about how the frequency, the volume is going up. We've seen some stats about engagement, although, for every stat I see that shows engagement is going up, I show another one that shows it's going down, or it's holding steady, or engagement is up, but clicks are down, opens are up, clicks are down. But I'm wondering what you all are seeing in your work with clients about people's willingness to continue opting in. Are we seeing any changes in organic acquisition these last few months? And that's an open-ended question. You all jump in, whoever wants to talk.
I think it depends on the industry. We have some industries where it's skyrocketed. So news, for example, people need, when they want to consume it, and they want to consume it in a timely manner, and they can customize it by the topics that you sign up for. So that I definitely increased. I do think that subscriptions for more commercial style increased as well, just because people are now consuming more and they have to consume online. But I did see, maybe a couple months after the pandemic initially hit, there was an increase in complaints and unsubscribes across the board for a lot of our senders, because everyone got in and then all of a sudden they were hit with a lot more than they were expecting. And so they were like, I'm only going to keep the messages that really matter, or that I'm going to frequent over and over again. So that did happen shortly after the pandemic. And then I'm curious to see what's going to happen after this holiday season and the increase of emails going. So I'm not sure yet, but we'll see in a month or so how that goes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So Jenna, I can't answer specifically to the opt-in question, but what we definitely saw is the level of traffic of people trying to sign up for new services, whether through web forms or other methods, signing up for newsletters, as Jennifer mentioned. There's certainly peaks within different industries. But it also, it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, right? So more and more people are coming in and raising their hands saying that, yes, sign me up. But for as many good intentioned signups as there are also the bad actors out there. There's plenty of bots. There's plenty of folks that will provide a false email. We saw a stat from Keith in his presentation talking about using disposable domains to sign up for a product, which basically means I want to get into your site, I want to do what I want to do, but I never want to hear from you again. That's why you use disposable domains. So importance of verifying an email at all points of entry has, skyrocketed, just to make sure you're not emailing and just blindly starting your campaigns to folks that really don't want to hear from you and possibly lead you to a deliverability problem down the road.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I hope people take away from here is how your acquisition practices at the start can affect your deliverability. If you have really terrible acquisition, you're going to have deliverability issues. Even if you have a solid goal acquisition program, you may end up with deliverability issues that are unrelated, but there is definitely a connection between the two. So let's move into another question. And I'm going to open it up to just more of kind of a general conversation about the steps that your company can take to reach more customers via email, whether that means to improve your deliverability, work on engagement factors. What are some of the best things that you advise clients to do to reach out and build a stronger relationship through email? And whoever would like to tackle that first, go ahead.
Sure, I'll go. So there's a few things I've seen people doing. One is going through and reviewing all of their marketing properties, their social media profiles, and just making sure, are we asking for sign up everywhere we can? And do they all actually work? Is there any kind of vetting going on any of these forms? I also have seen a lot more recently, a lot more like bot type signups, and I think that's what also Jim is seeing too on their end when they're validating, is that there are more junk coming in, and the clients I've had that have come to me and we're looking at their email acquisition and how they're growing their list. Some of them don't have things like CAPTCHA or validation happening at the sign up. And so they're getting overwhelmed with garbage that then sinks them the first time they send that message out. So that's one thing. Is the two things is to be everywhere, but also to vet all the data you're bringing in. Those would be my two biggest pieces of advice.
Okay. Zach, how about you? What are you seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that, and this kind of piggybacks what Luke just said there too. It's just so essential to qualify the data and then qualify for engagement once the data is qualified. The essential first step is make sure you're as many places as possible have touch points out there for people to be opting in. The second essential step is make sure that those are valid email addresses and not going to cause you trouble when you go to send. And then the third thing is, the last place where you could see a false negative is you keep sending emails to people who aren't opening, which is, we have a lot of clients where that they just, they take it personally that someone could opt in and then not engage. And they think the answer to that, to improving engagement, is to keep trying harder to get that person to engage. And more often than not, the answer is they're telling you this is their interest in your email. So pull them back, try and re-engage them later. But a lot of times it creates a false positive when our clients send too many emails to the disengaged subscribers and then end up throwing everything out the window because they didn't think it worked. And there were good subscribers there that if they had done a good job prioritizing, that channel would have had more volume potential.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'd add too that when you are reaching out more, making it more visible to subscribe, you should also be very clear about what they're subscribing to, because I think that could be something that you get excited when you subscribe, but then you're like, I did not expect 5 emails a day. So set the expectations. If you can, give your customer choice, because they will be happier with you if they can say, I only want 1 a week versus 3 a week, or whatever the cadence is that you have for your program. And I think that will build that relationship more, because they can actually tell you through a preference center in some way on what they want, and that will make your deliverability better as well. And one thing, if you do reach out or you are seeing somebody unengaged and you're sending out these messages, don't be fooled just by opens, because sometimes people, it's a preload if you happen to scroll over, but people may open just to unsubscribe, or they open and then complain. So you have to look at all of your metrics and the overall pattern of behaviors.
Yeah, I've always felt too that you have to really stress the benefit of opting in. I see all these, you go to a new website and there's a thing that says sign up for our email. It's like, I don't need another email. Why? What's in it for me? Why do I care? And I would like to see more companies stressing that, as Jennifer says, you need to set the expectations, let them know what they're getting, and explain why it's to their benefit. And then, of course, you have to deliver on that promise. But that's a whole different. We'll talk that some other time. But
hey, Janet, I wasn't going to say this because it sounds self-promoting, but
say it.
Just put it up in the chat. Jen mentioned the opens and the clicks. Remember, spam traps will look like a deliverable email address, right? Some spam traps will actually be managed and open and show clicks. And so you think you're doing great and you're measuring and you're saying that's an engaged user, but it's actually going to be flagging and warning the ISPs that this is not an opted-in email address that you're using, and could get you in a heck of a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely the importance back on validation, removing those email addresses from your list to avoid that type of situation. So thank you to whoever put that in the in the chat. Can't tell.
Right. And I am not seeing that. So I need to probably get my session up here. I had to turn it off because I was getting feedback from it. But okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and let us talk a little bit more since we're on this subject. We're talking about acquisition. Let me ask you a question that I know is going to get everybody talking. Should we buy a list? Discuss.
I can hop in.
There you go.
I mean, and really, this
so.
question comes down to, and we're kind of asking this question semi-facetiously, but if you're working with someone elsewhere in the company who's coming to you and saying, "Hey, I got this great list of 1 million people I bought for $100 off the internet," we need to come up with language that explains to them why that's really not a good idea. So that's kind of the reason behind asking that question. So.
Yeah, and I would say, the short answer is obviously no. The long answer is, that type of question is part of the problem our clients have with acquisition in general. Is they think there's a silver bullet solution. They think there's like a single source solution out there that can get them the volume and quality they need, and they just have never been able to find it. And that's why they're constantly frustrated with acquisition, because there should be a way to quickly solve this problem, and we've just never been able to do it. And that's it's just like any other marketing campaign. It's ideally, you'd want like an evergreen paid solution for growing your email database, not something that is just tapping into individual lists here and there for growth. You're finding ways to continually be growing, continually be monitoring the engagement rates of the subscribers that are coming in. But I think that's the most important thing we say when our clients ask that type of question, is reframing the question to be like, there isn't like a silver bullet solution that you're going to find tomorrow that solves your growth solutions. We have to look to build an acquisition campaign that's evergreen, living and breathing, daily optimizations, just like any other work you're doing for your marketing mix.
Okay.
The best reason not to do it is because it doesn't make financial sense, right? One of the things that people do is they think, oh, well, I'm going to go get this list and it's dirt cheap, and then I'm going to have all these addresses. And it doesn't matter that, a boatload of it is going to be junk, because even these few addresses are going to be worth it at this price. And what I find that happens with that is a few things. First off, the first thing that happens is you tend to create a bunch more problems. Before you can even send to it, you really need to validate and find out, what did you actually buy, and understand what's worth that's even deliverable out of what you bought. And so right there, you're going to have a cost. And now we're going to start adding on to your $100, right? So that brings some cost. Then you're going to take what's left, most of whom have never heard from you, don't know who you are, and are going to complain or sink your rep, and you're going to send it out. And that's going to cause a bunch of other deliverability problems. Every one of those problems is going to result in more and more cost. And I think when you really look at, okay, if I do this and I know I'm going to, get blacklisted, or I know I'm going to get junked and I'm not going to reach my main list, what is that going to cost me? And when I start to figure that out, what I find out is that the short and easy path ended up costing me more in the long run, and that I would have been better off staying with, more reliable acquisition sources. And the other thing you have to do is track back everything from that, so that at the end, you know what you really got. And I think if you really do those kind of steps, what most people are going to find is that the cheap list that they bought really ended up hurting them more in a dollars and cents perspective than had they spent the money to do acquisition properly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else? So let's look at the cousin to buying a list. What about renting lists? Is that still an option? Is that more or less of an option these days, especially when we're looking at all the changes that are coming to data protection and privacy through GDPR, through the California laws, and possibly even someday a federal law here in the U.S. Is list rental even still an option? Anybody?
Else wants to jump in, I'll jump in. I think list rental and buying a list run down the same path, and the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
People are not, if these aren't your customers, at least communicating or buying something from you through another medium, then no. You should not be just purchasing a list or renting a list and emailing them. They've never asked for information from you. They probably don't know who you are. Your spam complaints will go up. That list could be riddled with bad data in it. Now, if these folks are customers of yours and you're looking to add an email, that's a whole nother topic of conversation. Because they are transacting with you and you're just trying to communicate with them through a new medium.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm going to actually, Zach, I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball because we didn't discuss this ahead of time, but I know that you just did a webinar with Fresh Address where you talked about list acquisition, a paid acquisition program, and you had some really good tips for people who are looking to use paid acquisition, and that has to do with how you either onboard or engage those people that you get through paid acquisition. Do you have any interest or any ability to tell us a little bit about some of those tips that you shared during that webinar with Fresh Address?
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of goes off of something I mentioned earlier too. We really preach to all of our clients to focus on early engagers because the so much of email behavior, and you can even think of yourself as a consumer here, is like building a behavioral rhythm with looking for the same brand names and types of subject lines in your inbox. So as soon as someone opts in through a paid channel, you've got a pretty tight window there to kind of build that relationship with them. So the people who are opening an email that come through a paid campaign within the first, within your welcome series or within the first 5, 10, 15 sends, and are giving you an early indication that they're expressing some sort of interest, taking multiple opens, clicking through, you should segment them and consider them the early engagers that you're going to focus more heavily on and try to move them into your regular sends that you might have reserved for organic or other ongoing campaigns. And the people who don't reach that threshold, again, don't take offense to it. It has to make sense financially, but if it makes sense financially to pull them off the regular sends and put them into a bucket and think I'll try and re-engage them later or whatever, you've got such a better chance making a paid acquisition campaign work if you can really focus on those early engagers and not get offended by the people who don't engage early, because our clients get into so much more trouble long term with deliverability and stuff when they just keep trying to send to people who haven't opened yet. So the sooner you can kind of build those inflection points in and come up with an early engagement KPI that you're really going to hold yourself to with your paid acquisition campaigns, that's generally been the recipes for success from our clients.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody have any other comments about either buying a list or renting a list, paid acquisition, any of these? Otherwise, we can move on. And again, I am unfortunately not able to see comments from the audience. So if we do have, if you are seeing any comments from the audience, panelists, please feel free to bring those in at any time so that we can get all those viewpoints in there. The next question I'd like to throw at you is, how do I measure success? What are the KPIs that are the most important? And again, I'll just throw that out there. Whoever would like to tackle it, fire away.
Sure. I think one trap that email marketers fall into is they focus a lot on the metrics that are available in the tool, right? So we focus religiously on opens and clicks, yet often our real goal of the campaign is something further down that's harder to measure, right? If we're doing a sales campaign, the real goal of the campaign is to make sales. So we should be focusing on email revenue per email or how many new orders we're generating. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't really connect the dots all the way to the end where they reach that final transaction. Or sometimes it's not a transaction. Maybe the goal is to get more engagement or to sign up for an app or something like that so that we can engage you in multiple channels, because then we know you'll probably respond more and spend more. We'll also be able to whittle out who those people are that aren't really engaged, to Zach's point, so that we can stop beating them over the head with this and focus on the people that do really want to talk to us.
Okay. Anybody else?
I agree with that. I would also add in whatever metrics that you have on your side, website traffic. Again, to Luke's point about your goal, you should keep in mind. But also for people who are heavily B2B, be cautious, because there can be a lot of bot traffic too that can be misleading. So almost every metric that I know that we have through email, it's a good guide, but it can be skewed depending on many things. So either opens aren't there because the image wasn't downloaded, or a bot clicked, or something else factoring into your metrics. So I would look at trending a lot more than just individual data points at a point in time. They can be helpful, but look at trending. And then you could look at subscription dates or removal dates, and then what happens in between. How many times did you contact them before they said no more? And keep in mind the removal dates, because again, to figure out how your threshold for when maybe too much is too much. But that one, I think you can, if you look at complaints, for example, not all receivers have feedback loops. So try to whittle it down to those receivers and see, is there trending amongst these, let's say 5, that I can say they all unsubscribed due to this campaign. Because if you look at the removal rate overall, it may be diluted. So you have to kind of bring it down to, at least in regard to complaints, to those that process those. And then for unsubscribes, although it's not a bad metric, it's still a gauge of, are your customers happy?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Just to throw in another point, since this is a deliverability panel and I talked about, business goals, I'd also like to mention the 3 I look at, especially if I don't have any other tools like, a deliverability monitoring suite like eData Source or Validity or any of the other ones. Validity seems to be the big one right now, and I believe they're a sponsor. But if you got to look at your opens, your bounces, and your spam complaints, and watch where those are going, because those really tell you what the people are doing on the list, right? And it's not just, am I hitting unknown users in hard bounces, but the soft bounces is where you find I'm being throttled, I'm being delayed. So make sure you actually bother to go read those things in there, and see what those reasons were. If you suddenly drop off in open rates and didn't really change anything, that might be an indicator that you're junking. And if you don't have other tools to tell that, that might be the only indicator you have. And usually when that happens, you will also see a rise in spam complaints. Always be laser focused on them. When those go up, your deliverability goes down. That's probably one of the most direct metrics that impacts what you do.
Yeah, I think it's really important, as Luke and Jennifer have mentioned, to look at the whole trending thing, digging into the numbers. That is so important. It's not the most exciting aspect of the job, but if you don't have a handle on your numbers, you're going to have problems building up that you don't anticipate. And this is one of the issues that when I was working with clients who are having some problems here, I would ask them these questions, and you'd get the deer in headlights look. Now, another issue, however, is that some marketers amazingly don't have access to these numbers. So, do you have any advice for how to work with people who need to get at the numbers, but have to request them from IT or from a database manager. Is this a problem that you are seeing, or do marketers generally have more access to the numbers that they need?
That can happen. In our experiences, it's definitely the former. And generally, our clients, we're working with the email teams, and they're part of a larger marketing department. There's like a lot of competing interests in pulling that data. And one thing we run into a lot with our clients is, email's generally like the forgotten child in that whole relationship. They're the last ones to get credit for attribution if there's not like a direct click through to e-com. So it's really easy for them to just kind of back down internally and not get the data they need to support that a campaign is working or not working. And that's a real challenge. It's very difficult. For one of the big things we're helping our email clients with is helping them sell the value of email internally to other marketing teams, so they can get a bigger share of tech resources, they can get a bigger share of marketing budget. And this, I think everyone on this call and hopefully a lot of the attendees have the feeling like it shouldn't be that way. I mean, email is like one of the few channels that's still growing in ubiquity. It's on your phone screen every time you look at it. Every single person in the world is like accessing email more and more than ever. So you would think it'd be like increasing, but for some reason, even with some like the largest brands we work with, the email teams are constantly fighting to get the internal resources they need. So even basic data pulls from their ESP for numbers and stuff like that, it can take days or weeks, and that can be the roadblock to a campaign working or not working.
I would say for those clients that have come to us and they struggled with some of the data, I can't speak to the platforms that they were working with, but I do know that one thing you could try to do if you can't get as much data, maybe you only have a subset, try to segment as much as you can. So you could segment by your acquisition source or by receiver, and then you have clear. So if you're only able to see like sent and open or something small like that, and you can't dig into specific profile attributes, try to segment up front so you can say, okay, I mailed this one campaign and it was just to Gmail, and this is how Gmail's performing, or this is to this acquisition source and they always perform really well. Then you can maybe tailor your customization or tailor your message by cadence or messaging based on acquisition source or receiver. I know, for example, like Microsoft, Gmail's heavily engagement focused. So you might say, just for Gmail, I need to be at 6 months engaged, but for other ones, I can handle 9 months. And you can start to customize based on that, or again, your acquisition source, and that really will also point out if there's a gap that you need to fill, or you could say, that is a terrible acquisition source, I shouldn't use it. And if you find that some sources aren't working with email, try a different medium. Email's not the only one out there.
That's right. Okay. Anybody else? Or otherwise, I'll move on to our next question. Okay. Here's a question that we did get. My leadership team is pushing hard on acquisition. How do I make the case that quality is as important as quantity? And we've talked about this a little bit. We've talked before about how to get the management team to understand that buying a list is not a great idea. But what else can we do on our side of the things that we can affect? What else can we do to make sure that we're making the case for quality? And
it seems like Luke is a good person to be talking to in that, because it's the numbers. If you can explain the finances of it, I think that's how you're going to get leadership to. But it's so true. I mean, data ownership growth is just such an importance to all of the clients we work with. And there's just this top-down pressure to get more of it. And the burden of that falls on the email team, because they have to figure out how to send emails effectively to those subscribers that might be coming in at a rate that's higher than what they've ever been used to or what they've ever planned for. So, ultimately, it's a numbers game. The volume, list growth doesn't matter if you're not getting engagement. Engagement doesn't matter if you're not getting, some sort of estimated revenue or real revenue from it. So I think the only way to prove it is with those sorts of like hard numbers.
Okay. Anybody else?
If I could jump in. So, of course, the pressure is always to identify more people that want to buy your stuff, right? But if you do it the wrong way, unlike direct mail, right, where if you deliver to 5% that bounce back on you or get returned or end up with someone that you didn't intend it to go to, the other 95% aren't impacted at all. They still
Right.
But in email, as we all know, you send to 5% that are bad, or they bounce or whatnot. It impacts the rest of your list. It impacts your ability to get to the inbox. It impacts your ability to get past the spam folder, right? So management has to understand, yes, we all want to acquire more, but we cannot do it at the cost of the folks that truly want to hear from us, right? Because what happens if 25% of the folks that truly want to hear from you and are potential buyers, start going to right to the spam folder instead of to the inbox? You just lost 25% of that opportunity that you had. And Zach said that Luke was probably better at the finances than this and I, but it's a no-brainer. If you don't do it correctly, you're putting the real targets at risk. So you have to make sure you do it. You have a great sound strategy, and you make sure you're sending to true email addresses.
The other thing I do, besides using the financial argument, which usually once you have the money on the table,
Show me the money moment.
Right. The other thing you can do is look at your own history. Chances are this isn't the first time you've been pressured, or your predecessor maybe was pressured to do this exact thing in a moment of panic. So go back, find when that happened and what was the outcome. Because chances are what you're going to be able to refute this person is you're going to be able to turn around to another, hopefully less invested member of the management team and say, hey, they're pushing for me to send out this old junk list again. Last time we did that, this is what happened. We got blacklisted, we got junked, we didn't reach our sales goal. You can point to was historically just for us, this is what broke when we did this. And usually those things get brought up every once in a while, and the easiest way to squash it without having to really do all the math is to just say, last time we did that, this, and this broke.
Mm-hmm.
And now we usually end it.
Good advice. That is excellent advice. Here's another topic that has been getting some conversation. What about hiring a lead gen or list growth vendor? What do you think about that? And if that's an option that's on the table these days, how do you vet those people so that you're winding up with a good, honest partner as opposed to a fly-by-night operation?
I can hop in, although we're probably the closest. DMI is probably the closest to being this for clients, so I'm not going to do a self plug here. But the biggest thing I would say is, if you're considering it, you're probably considering it because there's an inherent need for acquisition to begin with. So don't let anyone convince you. Don't let a lead gen vendor convince you need to do acquisition if you haven't decided that yourself. Once you've decided that, you do have to do a self-assessment and figure out, do we have the expertise internally to do this? Do we know enough about lead sourcing to be able to do this internally? The same question you would ask yourself about paid search, paid social, any other channel. Do we have the expertise to tackle this alone? And if the answer is no, then it's probably worth contacting someone or putting an RFP out or talking. And the big thing that I would recommend looking for is make sure that you're hearing things that sound like that vendor's interests are aligned with yours. If you're hearing a lot of, let's test this at 100 a day, and then very quickly we can do 1 million a day, that's a red flag. That's someone who's got like a volume incentive, and they don't, in my experiences, tend to be very good at hiding that. So if you're looking for it, you'll find it. Look for people that are structuring campaigns and saying the things to make you think that they understand email, they understand how hard it is to acquire high volumes of new emails and continue delivering to your existing emails, to the points everyone just made. So just be shrewd, just like you would be with any other vendor selection.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'd echo that. It's quality over quantity, right? You just have to make sure that they are following best practices, that they're not doing anything that you wouldn't do yourself. When you work with someone like this, you're doing it to expand your reach and expand your team, but they have to act the way you would act, right? So make sure they're following best practices and the processes that you would follow if you're doing it internally.
Okay.
I know one of the things that we used to always do when I worked in the B2B trade magazines, and we had people that did this with us, and we also did this with people that we did rental or acquisition from, was that we would go sign up for their stuff without telling them, using an address not associated with the company. So basically, we would seed their list with ourselves to see whether you really do what you say? Do you walk the walk? Are you really emailing the same people like 5-6 times a day and burning them out? Are you a churn and burn type operation? Another thing to do is ask them for their sending address. What domain do you use to send this out? Go run a bunch of quick checks. Check it out in like some of the free tools. Make sure it's not blacklisted. Make sure that it has a decent sending reputation. Did they really authenticate their email? The people that check all those boxes tend to be people that care and conduct a clean business. And so those are the partners you want to find. The other thing to look for is, how do they charge? If they charge on delivered emails, then there's a volume incentive, because that will increase the amount they can charge you. However, some people will charge on like delivered emails that actually respond, or if you're doing customer acquisition, it might be on the number of acquired customers. So look for the ways that they charge, and do those align with actually acquiring the people you want.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Anybody else? Otherwise, I do have another question a little bit related to this. But, we've been talking about just like general acquisition. But what about when you want to dig a little bit deeper? How do you leverage email and acquisition to acquire new high-value customers without running into regulatory issues? And, we've talked a little bit today about aiming toward the high-value customers as opposed to just anybody that, that you can rope in off a list rental thing. But how can we do this without running afoul of some of the new data collection, privacy, storage, and protection laws? So once again, I'll throw that out there for anybody who wants to tackle that.
Who's going to go in the minefield?
It is a tough field.
I mean, I feel like I've read a million articles over the past 5 years from every digital news source that with the same headline, which is that the future is opt-in. And I think that's like the number one rule to just keep in mind is you make sure people are opting in. Make sure you're finding channels where people are opting in to receive your messages. You're sending messages to people who want to hear from you, and then you're monitoring as you're sending to them that they actually want to hear from you. And any time you're getting an indication that that's not the case, you need to pull back and reevaluate. But I think that the opt-in is just such a key component to it.
But what about farther down the line, though? I mean, the opting in is one thing. Of course, if you're, in a country that is governed by GDPR, you don't have an option. You have to opt in. The business case rules for adding an address without a clear opt-in are pretty strict. So what can you do after you manage opt-in? Let's say you only do organic acquisition, you don't do paid acquisition, you don't do co-reg, any of that. What else can you do to make sure that you're operating on the right side of the law?
I think one of the biggest things you can do is to involve more than just the email team, right? Mm-hmm. The email team alone cannot be totally responsible for all aspects of digital privacy and data storage. That is a huge undertaking. And that's, while we're very close to the data and we do store a lot of the data, that's not our main focus. Our main focus is marketing and driving people to the site, driving sales, driving whatever we're marketing, right? So you need to be collaborative. You obviously do need to understand the laws and what you can and cannot do. And I do think email will become more important, right? As cookies are going away, email is becoming the de facto identifier. So it is going to be all on us. And the best thing you can do is educate yourself and look for the help within your own company, because you're not going to be able to do it all alone.
Mm-hmm. Well, Luke, I want to build on something you just mentioned. We've been hearing a lot about how cookies are going away as an identifier. And I'm wondering if any of you have talked about this with your clients yet. Jennifer, if this is a topic that has come up at Zeta Global, or Zach, are you approaching this? Have your clients asked you about this? What are you seeing people doing on this?
Well, I don't want to talk over you there, Jennifer. I was looking for the mute button to see if you were unmuted. I'll kick it off and hand off. So it goes back to exactly what Luke said. Email is going to be the new identifier moving forward. That secret seems to be pretty well out of the bag, and it's causing all the other stuff we talked about in this call, which is just this top-down urgency to collect email addresses. That's the effect I think we're feeling from it. Is it's the foregone conclusion of like a cookieless future has prompted a lot of people to realize that email is the key. We need to get more of our customers' emails if we want to communicate directly with them and not have to rely on, our third-party partners that we don't know how they're preparing for the future if they're taking it as seriously as we are. So,
okay.
I was going to echo a similar sentiment about just focusing on your email, focus on the data that you do have. Reach out through whatever means that you have. So if you don't have email, but you can do direct mail, you can reach out in that way and keep your list updated and those, and then share how they can combine. So you might email them, you might do a direct mail, and then share all of your information other ways. Show the importance and the benefits. I know we mentioned that earlier in the call, but say this is the benefit of subscribing to this list and not just being a guest on our site or something like that, so that you can then garner more information from that customer and tailor your list and your communications.
And then I think to add, give them more reasons to provide you with the email address, whether it's through content that delivers some value, or, if you're a retail site, an offer to take advantage of. A lot of the restaurants using loyalty programs, provide your email address, get a free cup of coffee, so give folks more reasons to sign up for to give them your email address. And then I sound like a broken record, but make sure they're giving you a legit email address, right? And validate at every single point of entry. Make sure that who they say they are is truly who they say they are, and that you're going to be able to deliver that email address. And train your folks that are collecting those emails to double check, right? So if you provide a validation service and it comes up with an error, and you're a cashier at a point of sale system, you should train your folks to say, I'm sorry, that email is not going through. Can you provide it to me again, or did I have the spelling wrong?
That's an important point. I would say that, when I work with especially retailers, collecting the emails at the point of sale is probably the one where you see the most typos and the most mistake addresses given in, right? It's not that the person's trying to ghost you with the disposable email. It's just that their handwriting was sloppy that day, or I made a typo and I didn't really notice it. And then so checking those and using things to see, did I get the right address in the first place is key. But not only doing that when they first sign up, but also checking it later on. There'll be times, most of us change email addresses. I think that the rate of changing of email addresses is going down. However, it's because we don't change them anymore. We just add a new one and ignore the old one, right?
Right.
So making sure every once in a while, especially with your inactives, is this really the right address to reach you at? Is this where you want to be? Hear from me. And you can do that through multiple channels, and you can use services to help you find those correct addresses and then reach out, and again, maybe you found a better address through them through like a service or an append, then after that, reach out to them on perhaps another channel like social and say, hey, you know, are we really sending the right place? At the same time, don't come across as like you're stalking them. So there's a delicate balance.
So if I could jump,
cookies too, right?
absolutely. So if I could jump on that point you made, Luke, the health of your list is not a single point in time, right? So checking it once and validating at point of entry, or switching ESPs and cleansing your list before you put it into the new ESP, it's not one and done. You have to monitor your list over time. What about newly acquired emails? As you grow your list and you acquire new emails, make sure those are good emails as they come in. But then email them regularly. Watch your bounces, watch for engagement, and then constantly revalidate those emails, right? So it has to be an ongoing practice. Otherwise, sooner or later, you're going to trip up. If you take your eye off that ball, you're going to trip up.
I like your point, Jim, that it is not, list hygiene is not one and done, that you have to keep doing it. Can you tell us a little bit more about real-time validation? Because I'm seeing more websites use this, more general websites using this. But at some of the sites that I visit that you would think it would really benefit, like a retail website, you're not seeing this. You're just seeing that it just accepts it. It doesn't send any kind of confirmation email. It just, your address just kind of goes into a void. And I'm wondering if you can talk very briefly about what some of the benefits of being able to validate in real time are for people and how that can affect deliverability.
Absolutely. I mean, so websites that use real time, they have a higher percentage of emails that get into their list that are actually emailable, and probably face less problems than those that aren't validating in real time. But there are many times, even our real time validation service gives you the option to whether allow the email to pass and go through, regardless of whether it passed validation or not. I gave the example of a free cup of coffee when signing up for a loyalty program. As a business, you don't want that customer to have a bad experience. And yes, maybe they mistyped the email, or maybe they gave you a disposable or a fake, whatnot, but you still want them to get the free cup of coffee, right? You don't want to turn them away. So in cases like that, what's happening is they're being marked as invalid and sent, so that at least they're flagged when they get to the marketing list and they're not being emailed to. But the user still has a good experience, right? It's the companies that aren't doing anything at point of entry that, I can't understand why anybody would put them at risk, themselves at risk that way. So there's services like ours that have real-time validation. There's lots of others. And it's milliseconds return, type in an email address. And some of these services like Fresh Address will actually auto-correct an honest mistake. So if someone types jtinney@gmail.com, our service is smart enough to know you meant gmail.com. So they'll flip it and validate the correction on right at that point in time, and then test it. And so it's paramount to people's success in building a list. If you really truly want to build a list, build it with quality, put in real-time verification. If you can't do real-time because your point of sale doesn't allow for it today, do it in automated batch. You can do automated batches that, every night. We have retailers that do it once every night before it gets into the CRM system. They just validate all the emails. They get the flags. They incorporate the flags. Now they have a good email list to market to the next day as they confirm that person signed up for the email.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Well, I see by the old clock on the wall that we have about a minute left in our session. So let's go around. Let's start with Luke. And if you can just give us just one quick tip, one go away tip, or one sum up that we could use to close out. And we'll just go right around the group.
Sure. So the biggest tip I can give you about deliverability is that be prepared, because it does take time and effort. A lot of people approach a lot of deliverability aspects as the one and done. So but it's not one and done. It's every day, all day. So that's one thing I would give you a tip is to pay attention to it all the time so that you can spot the issue before you're on the blacklist or being junked. The other thing I would say is check all your points of contact. To Jim's point, where we were talking about the validation just now, everyone thinks about those sign-up forms, but don't forget where you get a lot of your people is within the cart. Make sure you validate in the cart. You can't send an abandoned address email to a broken address.
Okay. Jen, how about you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say Jim or Jen?
I said Jennifer. Well, I should have
Jennifer,
said
go ahead.
Jennifer. I think I said Jen. But Jennifer,
worry.
will you go next?
Sure. To echo Luke's statement, I would say, everything's fluid. So your customers are fluid, the receivers are fluid. There's always going to be things that are changing. So what works today may not work tomorrow, whether it's the customer's decision or the receiver's decision. So just keep in mind with what they want and change with them, and ask as much as you can with profile pages or whatever you can from them. That's going to inform your decisions. And if they're happy, everybody else is happy.
Okay. And Jim?
Yeah, so I think we talked about the impact of COVID, put more and more pressure on email marketing and staying in touch with customers in a new way for many industries. That's not going away. I think people need to understand this isn't temporary. I think folks are getting used to the not only marketing by email, but receiving more emails from more companies that they interface with. Set up a process, stick to it, make sure you manage your list, keep the hygiene clean, constant monitoring of email and email list health.
Great, thank you. And Zach, wrap it up and send us out.
Sounds good. So I'll share more on the acquisition perspective since we talked a lot about that today. But my parting advice is always question what means acquisition is an end to. As we've talked a lot about in this call, there's a lot of people come into the conversation with thinking there's inherent value to their list growing. That if that's their goal, is to grow the list because that's what I was told to do. But as we've talked about here, it's not list growth. It's engagement growth. It's conversion growth. It's sales growth. And step one before all of that is increasing the amount of emails you deliver. And so if your acquisition is hurting your ability to deliver emails, none of those other end games are possible. So really focusing on deliverability and making sure your acquisition is
excellent. Thank you so much, everybody, for giving us your time today. We've covered a lot of ground. I'm sorry if we had questions from the audience, I wasn't able to see them, but stick around. There's another great session coming up right after ours. And I see there's Andrew. And Andrew, we are out. Thank you again, everybody, and have a great rest of the session.
No, thank you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
With all of you. I want your socials. I haven't got everyone's socials. I haven't got everyone's blog links. I want to share those and get your names out there and do what I can to help promote whatever you guys are doing. So if I don't get in touch with you, feel free to email me. I will do my best to get in touch with each one of you individually. And thank you so much for your time.